Hey guys, today's February 27th. Today I want to make an updated video from the one I posted yesterday about the severe weather threat for the Great Lakes region and Ohio Valley. There have been quite a few changes regarding the event, so I figured it was wise to make a video about it today quickly. I want to jump right into the high resolution radar from the HRRR model. That's what we'll be looking at today. This is the latest run. It starts off at this afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central Time. So let's go out a few hours from now. We have this warm air in place, moisture coming up into Illinois and Indiana. And then right around 7 p.m., this would be 7 p.m. Eastern Time, a few hours from now, you can see the start of what looks like storms developing in Illinois right here. And maybe even a line developing, it looks like almost across northern Indiana and the central Ohio. That's in association with the warm front lifting north, and then we have the cold front back this way. And then just going out one more hour, you can see storms start developing by around 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. Central Time across portions of northern Illinois. A couple of storms developing across northern Indiana down into eastern Ohio along the warm front. And then as we go further out in time, you can see we have by around 8, 9, 10 o'clock, we have multiple thunderstorms developing across northern Illinois, southeastern portions of Wisconsin. We have more across northern Indiana developing, moving into lower Michigan. And then also another threat area is down along the Ohio River here. Portions of southern Illinois and southern Indiana will have thunderstorms developing. Now, the concern is that as these storms develop tonight, they might start off discrete and supercellular. So the threat there would be for very large hail, and maybe this would be the best chance to get tornadoes while they remain discrete and supercellular, especially across portions of northeastern Illinois, maybe portions of northern Indiana and then the second threat area down in southern Indiana and southern Illinois. And now as we go further out, as we get closer to midnight, storm, we have the two areas I'm most focused on. The first one in the north, we have a possible line of storms developing here from southern lower Michigan into northern Ohio. That would be along the warm front, and that will be lifting to the northeast. As the storms develop more into a line instead of more discrete, the main threat will switch over from being, instead of large hail and tornadoes, to it being more of a damage and wind threat. That would probably be the main threat for portions of Michigan and northern Ohio. But around midnight, storms will still be more discrete across southern Illinois, southern Indiana, and southern Ohio. The concern is that these will still have the best chance for hail and maybe an isolated tornado, because these storms will stay more supercellular for a little longer, I think, before they become more like clusters. That'll be occurring during the overnight hour. As we get to around 1, this would be around 2 o'clock Eastern Time. You can see the storms across the southern portions of Indiana and Ohio become more into line segments, so the threat would start switching over into a damage and wind threat for places like Cincinnati and Louisville. And then that line of storms across the north, the instability starts to fade a bit overnight, so these will probably be starting to weaken, but could still get a stray damage and wind gust for portions of northern lower Michigan. And as these storms move into portions of western Pennsylvania, northwestern Pennsylvania, maybe as far west as getting as Buffalo, New York, but also still could get some more thunderstorms developing across portions of Ohio overnight. And as we go a couple hours later, this would be around 5 a.m., the main threat would start shifting over to the south, where we have a new line of storms developing, still pushing eastward into southeastern Ohio, southern Ohio, into northern portions of Kentucky. The main threat there would be more like damage and wind instead of large hail or tornadoes with that. And then as we go out all the way to the end of the cycle, this would be around 7, 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. The cold front will be somewhere in here like this, and we still have some clusters of storms across Kentucky, southern Ohio, and West Virginia, but there's not a lot of instability by this point, so I'm not expecting widespread severe weather with this, but could still get a couple gusty winds, maybe some small hail out of that. Now next, I just want to quickly look over at the parameters. Let's start with the Cape. So this is how much energy we have in the atmosphere at the moment. This would be right around now. You can see we have values over 1,000 all across portions of northern Illinois, central Illinois, to portions of northwestern Ohio and southern lower Michigan. Now for late February, this is incredibly high. You don't usually see it this far north until more like later in March or April. So very early for this because we have temperatures in the 70s at this time with dew points even near 60 around Chicago. So we have the available energy out there. Next, I want to show you the helicity going into tonight. This is the amount of spin we have at the lower levels of the atmosphere. So this is like one of the main ingredients to get tornadoes. Once you have values over 100, which is anywhere in this blue color, that's enough to get tornado potential out of this. And as we go into past 7 p.m. tonight, look at how these orange and purple colors just explode across Indiana and Ohio and Kentucky, right in this region here. So this is definitely enough helicity out there to produce tornadoes. These values are showing at upwards of 400 to 500. The only question is the dew point high enough? Is there enough instability to cause tornadoes? That's what we'll have to see over the next few hours. Then one more thing I want to show you guys is the significant tornado parameter. We're just kind of putting all the ingredients together to see tornadoes on a scale of 0 to 10. As we go into around 7 p.m. tonight, you can see these orange colors start to blossom a lot across eastern Illinois into western Indiana. So we have tornado potential there. It's just if a thunderstorm develops in that area, it would be primed and it would have a very good chance of dropping a tornado, according to what this is saying. And then as we get towards later in the night, this would be around midnight, we don't get a lot of high values across the north. That's probably because we don't have a lot of instability in this area, even though we have a lot of helicity and very strong wind shear. But that's why we have the highest values, these orange colors and red colors, which is showing parameters of up to 3 and 4, possibly even over 4. So because there's a little bit more instability as you go further south, higher dew points. So southern Indiana, southern Illinois have the best chance of seeing a tornado by around midnight with their storms down there. And by after midnight, the instability dramatically weakens, so these values drop quickly. But after midnight, I think it's gonna be hard to get any tornado after midnight with the way the instability will quickly fade. It'll turn more into a damage and wind threat, I think, along the Ohio River Valley after midnight. And then going all the way to tomorrow morning, you can see the values just fade almost to nothing. And then I just want to go to a couple of model sound-ins quickly just to show you guys everything, all the ingredients we have out there. Let me go back to the radar. Let's go to around when the storms start developing. So let's go right here. This would be 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Central Time. Let's go to northeastern Illinois. This will be around Chicago. This is the model sound-in, what it's showing. So we have good enough wind shear down near the surface in the lowest kilometer. In the hodograph, we have good curvature going on. We have a good amount of wind shear, 30 knots in the lowest kilometer, and almost 50 knots of bulk shear. The helicity value is over 300. Like I said, all you need is any value over 100 is good enough to get tornado potential, and we have values over 300 for the Chicago area. Also, the mid-level lapse rates are pretty steep, so I think the threat of large hail is very realistic. And then as you see the possible hazard type down there, it says marginal tornado. So let's go to another area. Let's go to, as these storms start developing, Let's go to northern portions of Indiana. This will be northern, northeastern Indiana. You can see we have the same thing going on. We have very good curvature in the lower levels. We have very strong wind shear, 50 knots of bulk shear, 30 knots near in the lowest kilometer. Helicity values around 300. The only concern I have from this being a more widespread outbreak, like I said, is the dew points right here only forecasted of it being in the upper 50s. So not a ton of instability out there, especially on the northern side of this system, to produce tornadoes. So I think the highest tornado potential like with that would be across the Ohio River Valley rather than further north into the southern Great Lakes. For example, let's go to a sounding in southern Indiana at the same time. You can see dew point a little bit more. Dew point forecasted of 61, which would cause a little bit more instability for that region. And as you can see, we have some curvature in the lowest levels. Not a ton, but definitely a lot of shear. Look at this, 50 knots of shear forecasted in the lowest kilometer, 60 knots of bulk shear, and look, helicity values of over 500 for southern Indiana. This is probably why the significant tornado parameter was showing values of 3 and 4 for portions of southern Illinois and Indiana. I think the tornado threat is more realistic for that region. Places like Evansville and Louisville, maybe as far east as Cincinnati. Let's go to another one. Let's go right around the border of Ohio and Kentucky. You can see same thing. We have some curvature in the lowest levels, not a ton, but definitely have around 500 values of around 500 for helicity. Bulk shear 50 knots, and cape values just good enough, around 500 to 1,000 joules per kilogram. Let's go to one more. Let's go along the warm front in northern Ohio. Along the warm front in northern Ohio, we still have curvature. In the photograph, we got 60 knots of bulk shear, helicity values of over 300. But like I said, marginal temperature of only around 59 to 60 and dew point of 57. If the temperature and dew point were warmer, this would definitely be more of a tornado threat, but the way that the dew point is a bit too low, it might make the tornado threat not as high as it could be, which is good news if you live in the southern Great Lakes region. Other than that, I guess that's all we have for today. I wanted to make this video short. Hope everyone stays safe out there today and tonight, and be weather aware. Have a nice night, guys.